Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for dialing into this week's Brightside Talks. As you'll know, this is the latest in a little series that have been running for you whilst schools aren't meeting, so that you can log in and get some information about all sorts of things in thinking about your future. So we're really excited about today's talk. It's reflecting on a former student who got an awful lot out of their experience in higher education. So hopefully there'll be something for you to learn and some really interesting insights. But whilst I've got you, just a reminder that there's a chat box on here. So if you have any questions for our presenter throughout the talk, feel free just to put them in the chat box. If we got time at the end, I will ask them of our presenter as well, so that they can so you can get the answer right away. But I'll stop talking now and pass over to our host to introduce herself.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for joining. It's really nice to be doing this. So yeah, I'm Rosie, and I'm here to share my experiences at university that really enhanced my studying and meant that I felt well equipped for life after university. So I hope that this sharing these experiences might help you with decisions that you might be making at the moment. And hopefully also spark you to capitalise on experiences that are available to you. So whatever stage you're at, whether you're deciding to go to university, which university to go to, or which course to study, there are loads and loads of opportunities open. So now is the time to make the most of them. So I'm aiming to showcase just how many opportunities there are at university and how valuable these can be. And I really hope this will inspire you to check them out and have a go at anything and everything, basically. So what will I cover? Well, first of all, I'm going to speak a bit about studying abroad and Erasmus programme, and then also year in industry or year in practice, and also work experience or volunteering, and this can be abroad. So first of all, to give a bit of context, I will kind of cover my background, so a bit about me. When I was at school, there wasn't particularly one subject I enjoyed more than any other. I realised I quite enjoy variety. So I can completely understand that deciding on a university course can be quite daunting. I was lucky enough to discover a subject that combined multiple areas that I was interested in. Landscape architecture has elements of geography, art, and biology. It also appealed to me because it was vocational, so I had a good idea what job I would be going into once I'd finished the course. So I used my experience after GCSEs to see what it would be like to work in a landscape architecture practice, and this gave me a wealth of advice. And one part of that advice was that Sheffield, the University of Sheffield, was the place to go to study landscape architecture. And so when I went to the open day there, I realised that it was the uni for me. So in my third year there, I studied abroad. And this meant I realised just how multidisciplinary landscape architecture was. And I also did a year in practice or year in industry. And this meant I could discover which parts of the field I enjoyed most, and so then I was able to pursue those. And my volunteering experience throughout uni really helped me for any applications I've made. So I was really grateful for these 3 experiences when I graduated, as it gave me a really good direction as to what I was looking for in a job. And it also meant I could draw upon these experiences in cover letters and interviews, which enabled me to apply to roles which to me seemed really quite exciting. So now I'm working as an engagement officer for the Old Oak and Park Royal Development Corporation, which is the local planning authority and delivery agent for a 650 hectare redevelopment site in London. So my role is to share information and gain feedback from anyone who is affected by or involved with this redevelopment project. In taking advantage of the opportunities that were offered at university, I gained wide-ranging experiences, And this has meant that I've managed to find a job that means I enjoy it and look forward to my work days. So these experiences that I'm going to share with you, and this is the reason why I think these are so important and worthwhile. So I'm going to kick off with my first experience, which was my study exchange, which I did in the first half of my third year at university. So it was an announcement in a lecture that meant I found out about the Erasmus exchange and study abroad programmes. I took the chance to go to Sweden, and others on my course went to Japan and Singapore. There was also the opportunity to go to Australia, Germany, Hong Kong, and America. And friends on other courses went to Spain, Portugal, and Mexico. So although where you go and for how long varies from course to course, everyone I knew that did Erasmus or the study abroad programme absolutely loved it. And there are limited places on these programmes. So I applied to the lecturer who was the coordinator for it, and they then decided who would go on the programme based on student performance and contributions. But I would say don't let this put you off. There weren't any other students that applied for the place that I did. So the real advantage of Erasmus, I think, from my perspective anyway, was being able to travel and experience a different way of learning while also meeting new people from all over the world. And I could do this while having support from the university. So there was the lecturer coordinator, and I also had advice from previous students. I got really great helpful tips and answers from Gracie, who had been to Sweden the year before me. And this was really good, as it meant that I didn't feel as nervous going to a new place abroad as I thought I would. When we arrived, we had extensive inductions with all the other Erasmus students. And so we felt really welcomed and got to know each other really quickly. So from Erasmus, I gained brilliant friends from around the world and brilliant memories. It was really great to experience a different type of uni life to the Sheffield City campus. Alnarp, the campus in Sweden, was also an arboretum, which you can see in the top left of this slide. And as I arrived towards the end of summer, we spent the early evenings on the beach. I played tennis in courts that were surrounded by forest. We went on a canoe trip and celebrated lots of the Swedish traditions like the crayfish party. So it was also really nice to have friends in common with others who had done the exchange. So Gracie actually came to visit while I was out in Sweden. And also I then heard from friends that I'd made in Sweden and saw photos of them with the girl who went the year after me, which was also really fun. And just briefly to reassure you on Erasmus and Brexit, the fact that the government is committed to continuing the academic relationship between the UK and the EU is really promising. And also, most of the destinations that were options for me were international, and there's also summer school programs, which I was lucky enough to go to China on one of these. So despite Brexit, there's going to be lots of options for studying abroad. Okay, so next I will talk about another experience, and this was once I was back in Sheffield after Sweden. I got an email about a bursary that you could gain for course-related experience abroad, and it detailed an opportunity to volunteer constructing buildings in Fiji. As I was in the midst of major deadlines, I thought this would be a great motivation for getting through these. So once I'd provided evidence to the university that this volunteering experience was related to my course, they gave me a sum of money, and I spent 3 weeks living with a family and building this village hall in the village of Vivili. I've never experienced a culture so genuinely as I did in Fiji. I learnt from the other volunteers, most of whom were architecture students from Cardiff University, but also from the locals that I lived with and helped out on the construction site. From digging foundation trenches to building portal frames to Fijian barbecues, which were called lovos and involved wrapping food in leaves and burying it underground and cooking it that way, to collecting edible sea worms. The university had supported me in gaining invaluable life skills, which enhanced my CV and gave me examples to talk about in applications and interviews. Okay, so the next experience that was key in kind of setting me up for life after uni was the year in practice part of my course. So after 3 years of undergraduate study, it was compulsory for me to work for at least 9 months before going back to gain the master's degree. And on other courses, a year in practice or a year in industry isn't compulsory, but it's often an option for those people who would like to. And for me, the year in practice was great, as it meant that my first job wasn't so daunting. And the fact that I knew it was only for a maximum of a year meant there wasn't so much pressure to get it right. And it was basically a trial run at post-uni life. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things about work, but also about kind of setting myself up in general. One of those being that location is really important. So liking the area you live in, but also your living arrangements. And this differs for everyone. Some of my friends lived on their own or with one friend or several new acquaintances in a city, a small town, or in the middle of the countryside. And I think what was most challenging for me with this experience was finding a way of socialising in a new city. Once I got to Manchester, I realised I didn't have the networks that I'd had while I was at university. And I had to try and find a way of meeting like-minded people while working full-time for the first time. And volunteering was a great way of doing this. Having enjoyed all past volunteering I'd done, which included waitressing at the Real Junk Food Project's Sheffield cafes. While I was in Manchester, I waitressed at their restaurant there. And this was really good. I knew the cause, I knew it was something I'd like to donate time to. And it was also very different from my day job, which was desk-based. So it gave me the variety that I love. And also the social aspect, and the delicious meals were like an added bonus. So living and working in Manchester revealed a lot of things. Firstly, that Manchester wasn't the city for me, that it would be quite nice to be closer to family, and that I enjoy living in a house where I've got company. I was working for a small team as part of an environmental regeneration organisation and really enjoyed the work. Especially, I realised that projects engaging in consulting communities were ones that I particularly enjoyed. So all of this gave me a really good idea of where and what I wanted to do after university. And so that's meant that I've been able to find a job which I'm really, and work out where to live where I'm really happy, which I think is kind of the most important thing. So I'll conclude with some top tips. So if you're thinking about whether to go to university or which uni to go to, what course to study, I would say take into account whether the different options mean that you can study abroad and do a year in practice or a year in industry. And if the options that do allow for this, I would see that as a real advantage. And then once you get to uni, or if you're currently there already, do look into these opportunities. And if they're there, I would say just go for them. So yeah, be on the lookout, make the most of the networks that there are while you're at uni. And it might be that the perfect opportunity is out there for you. It's just a question of finding it and speaking to the right people. The experiences that I've talked to you about today are what most prepared me and gave me direction for my path after university. And if there's one thing that I would leave you with today, it's that all experience is good experience. Even if you don't enjoy it, remember that it was worthwhile, because that's the way to find out what you do enjoy. Thank you very much for listening.
Awesome, thanks so much, Rosie. There's certainly some really interesting experience there that I can certainly reflect on myself. If there are any questions for our speaker, please could you stick them in the chat box. We have a couple of minutes that we can answer any questions you might have. I'll also just remind you at this point that this is obviously one of a session of talks that we're going to be running every single week while schools aren't meeting at the moment. Next week, it's on Friday, the 1st of May. It's by a chap called Graham, who's a careers consultant, and he's going to be sharing some insight into some of the tips and tricks you can get for gaining insight into other people's careers and helping that with your own career plans for the future. The recording for this webinar will be sent out to you as well after this meeting, so it will go up on YouTube, so you can watch any of it back if you'd like to. And I'll also send the calendar for all of the upcoming talks that you might have. I can see that there's not any questions to add to the chat box, so I will leave you all to it. But thank you all so much for dialing in, and I hope to see you next week on our next talk. Thanks very much. Bye.